But that's a little bit about my personal experience, and that's also a little bit about the work that I've been doing for the last 15 years. What I like to do now is just open it up and let you ask questions, because I could talk for a long time and maybe not discuss something that you would like to know about. So you can feel free to ask me whatever you like. I get asked questions all the time, so there's probably not a question you could ask that I haven't already answered at some point. So, you know, I've been asked what it was like to come out, to did Jerry Falwell believe in UFOs? So there's a whole range of normal to oddball questions that I will give answers to. And while we do that, I want to pass around two things here. These white envelopes have some general information about Heartstrong. It's a great way to find out more about our work. There's also a little card in there about the Youth Empowerment Project to remind you how to find out about it. It's a great way to educate yourself about the work. And also, feel free to take some if you want to share with other people. And this clipboard has it's for our email list if you want to get our update sent to your email box. Usually comes every other week or so. It's a great way to find out what's going on with each outreach trip that we're doing, what we're doing, where we're at, how things are going. It's a really good way to do it. So if you want to do that, all you have to do is put your information here. I don't have a pen on here, so maybe if somebody could, if you don't have one, maybe borrow one from someone. But I'm going to pass these around. You don't have to take or do any of this stuff, but if you like to, please feel free. So, somebody over here had a question. Yes?
Anyway, so what do you think that was all about?
Yeah, you know, I'm not really sure. You know, to me, it seems a little bit more broken because I feel like my first step was to get out of fundamentalism, like my parents' house. Then the next step was to self-acceptance of the gay. I kind of see it as separate stages. But I think one of the things that really helped me as a kid growing up is that, you know, I had 4 sisters, and I had nothing in common with them. I mean, me playing with their dolls was really just hiding them from them and, you know, making them feel like their dolls got kidnapped and stuff. But usual brother stuff. But so I spent a lot of time by myself, and when I was about 10 or 11, I started writing down my thoughts, my feelings. At first I started doing poetry, and then I wrote some short stories, and that really made me feel like I was kind of getting out of me all the things that I felt. I would either put it into characters in my stories or whatever. So I got rid of a lot of, you know, anger and fear, which are the 2 things that keep people in pain. And so I think that really helped me. And I started, you know, I kept writing throughout my teens and into college, and obviously even today. I think that was one of the biggest things that helped me. Second thing was I'm grateful that I was gay, because I think that was the one thing I couldn't reconcile that with fundamentalist Christianity. I mean, I know there are people that do that. There's a big organization of gay fundamentalist Christians. I don't understand how you can do that, because there's so many other things wrong with fundamentalist Christianity, like racism and sexism and all those things. But I think being gay really kept me thinking I need to find something else. And whatever that moment was that made me start questioning things when I was in college, that was really the key for my life to start moving forward. And then
That's such a positive as opposed to self-destructive.
Yeah, but you know, I was pretty angry when I was a teenager, and even in college I was pretty angry inside. I could actually feel it. And a lot of times I thought that maybe it was because of the gay thing, I was angry about that. But it turns out that that was kind of more related to me not absorbing things from my parents, like self-love and, you know, being a kind, all those things that I should have gotten that I ended up getting from my grandmother, that contributed to that anger. So once I left college, you know, when I stepped outside of that world and I was on my own, that really gave me the freedom to kind of experience whatever it was that I needed to feel and experience towards my self-acceptance. And, you know, when I started, when I wrote The Preacher's Son, and people would write to me, a lot of men, some women would also write to me saying, oh, this has also been my journey, and this is how what you wrote has helped me. I got this weird feeling inside, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. It just felt strange and new, and so I just dismissed it, because that's what you do, right? You just dismiss anything. But then when I started doing my work with Heartstrong, and we started helping some of these kids, I got that same feeling. And I thought, you know, this almost feels like a spiritual feeling. But then as soon as I thought of that word, I immediately hid from it, because as a fundamentalist, your definition of spirituality is very different from where I was in my life at that point. You know, in the past, before then, when I would do something nice for somebody or out of kindness, it was always had a big giant rope attached to it, because I was doing it to try to drag them into my religion. But now I was doing things that didn't have that rope attached. It was just doing it to do it. And I started understanding a little bit more about human spirituality, which you don't get that in fundamentalist Christianity. But that's actually what I was feeling, that act of human kindness, which is what Heartstrong runs on, is something that I had never experienced growing up in fundamentalism. And I got to a decision, you know, right about the time that I started that relationship with my grandmother. I looked in the mirror one day and I decided that I could either let my upbringing define the rest of my life and make me angry or resentful or just have excuses for not doing something. Or I could take all those horrible things and turn them around and use them to help other people. And obviously over time I've realized that that's really all any of us can do with the bad things that happen to us, is just turn it around and try to use it for something good. Because you can't get rid of it, but you can certainly use it for good. And also when I was a kid growing up, I had a pretty good sense of humor, but I was very sarcastic, which is another reason why Beth Morgan and I were in corners in elementary schools, because none of my elementary school teachers liked sarcasm. But as an adult now, I've used humor as a way to make people, because most of you probably weren't fundamentalists, but using humor and how I talk about it kind of draws everybody to understand a little bit better. So those are some of the things I think that got me where I am. Yes?
How to approach
Yeah, I think
my feelings and what to do.
one of the biggest mistakes we've made in our country, certainly not the biggest, but one of the biggest mistakes we made throughout our history is assuming that people that are fundamentalists, or even some of the evangelicals, because a lot of fundamentalists don't vote, so we don't have to really worry about them. Like my parents didn't vote. That's one of the divisions between fundamentalists and evangelicals. And we better be glad they don't vote, because we would all really be in a sinking ship if they actually did get out and vote. Because they believe the part of the Bible that says God chooses the leaders of your country. So they don't believe that actually casting a ballot actually counts. Which I guess a couple of years ago it didn't either anyway. So they might have been right about another thing. Damn it, I'm not winning this argument. But yeah, that's it. Yes. But like Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't believe in voting, and that's a good thing, because we don't want them joining up with all the people that are voting against us, because they would be on their side and not ours. But one of the biggest mistakes we make as a country is that we assume that these people are going away. We assume that what they're doing is not having any influence. And every time that happens, they always surprise us and they come back and take away even more. Not just from gay people, but from women, from everybody. And that if we stop assuming that they're going to disappear, then we're going to move forward a lot more quickly. That ridiculous Rick Perry thing in Texas where he had that big prayer meeting last weekend? People were saying, oh, there's only 8,000 people that signed up for it, so nobody's coming. And then there's over 25,000 that show up. So once again, us and the media are wrong about how these people are, what they're willing to do to show support for stuff. And it's very hard to get any gay anything for 25,000 people to show up unless there's a good beer garden, right? That's it. That's what gets us to show up. So they have the power to do and change a lot of things. So if we keep sleeping and thinking that these people aren't going to keep changing our country to their point of view, we're going to wake up one day and we're going to find out that they've taken everything from us. All the things that they claim we're doing from them, right? Because they're always the martyr. We're going to find that they've actually done it to us, and we can't sleep because they are ready and willing to do everything. And we just can't sleep on it. That frustrates me a lot. Fortunately, I have other things to do with my time and energy, so I don't have to be on a soapbox screaming about that all the time. But we just can't think that these people aren't going to do everything to change the way this country exists, because they really feel like that's their mission, especially if they have a religious reasoning behind their political involvement. Again, they don't care about what people think about them here. They're just thinking about what they're going to do when they have to answer to God for whether or not they've motivated people to turn this country around to their point of view. That's what they're thinking. So if we understand that, that can motivate us to make sure that we are vocal and active about the things we believe in.
One of the things that I find is so many, not people in this room, but people that I know who would be doing that normally have taken the route of saying, I'm going to stay above the fray and I'm going to stay home and meditate and chant.
Yeah.
Thoughts. And I feel like there are so many people who have just walked away from the
Right.
fight that is frightening.
It's because people are tired of fighting. It's hard to keep going after you've been fighting for, 10, 20, 30, even 40 years now about this stuff. But we just have to keep doing it. We have to find ways to motivate people to do it for good. And whatever I do, whether it's work for Heartstrong or anything, I always just think, my job here right now is to make sure the people that come behind me don't have complaints about what I didn't do. Because I used to think that way. When I first came out and started working through my stuff, I thought, why aren't there any gay people who are older than I am who made it easier for me to go through the stuff that I went through and get out of it? And I couldn't find it. So I thought, well, rather than be angry about that for the rest of my life, I'm just going to make sure nobody comes up to me and says that. We have a responsibility for every kid in this country to make sure they grow up in a country that's actually, a pluralistic nation, which is what the religious right is trying to eradicate, or they actually don't even believe we ever had one. But we just have to keep pushing, find ways to motivate people. I guess just have a beer garden, just open bar, get people to show up. Yeah. Yes. Right. Well, we have 15 outreach programs, and each one is designed kind of with the same path. We get information about what we do in places where they can find it so they can come to us. So it's kind of indirect, and we do it that way because we're very sensitive to where they are. Most of the students that we deal with are not even thinking about accepting themselves. They're thinking they're struggling with this. So we make sure that we don't do anything that appears to be aggressive or confrontational, because that will turn off the majority of the people we're trying to reach, and we don't want to have that happen. One of our outreach programs is we do school visits where we go right on the campus of the schools. We have special materials designed that we leave everywhere. We put them in books in the library, we put them in the restrooms, put them up on bulletin boards, slide them under people's doors. You know how in high school you had those vents in your lockers about this big? They made those vents the perfect size because they knew that we were going to be coming through with our materials and just sliding them into everybody's locker as we go through the high school. We have a whole bunch on our table that are free, yeah. Oh, we just walk in. Yeah, I've learned in life that it's better to apologize and ask for permission, and that works in every area except for interpersonal relationships. I also learned that. But, with religious schools, it's a lot easier to get in to do some of this stuff than if we were trying to get into public schools, because everybody at religious schools has guns anyway, so it's not the same security issues. In fact, when we went through hundreds of these when we did our visit to Kalamazoo Christian Academy, in fact, 10 years ago, that's the first time we ever did the old vent in the locker pass-out thing. We actually tested in that school. Everybody was out at a football game, so we had full run of the school. So as we were putting our stuff out, I thought, well, let's see what happens if we put these in view of somebody who works for the school. And the cleaning person was coming through cleaning restrooms and stuff. So we put some of these in each restroom. We put the You Are Not Alone and the Choose Loved Ones in the restrooms in each stall. Plenty of time for people to read. And I thought, let's see what happens. Because we modeled these after religious tracts. The little flyers that people pass out telling you how to avoid hell. And, I got tired of seeing the anti-gay tract, so we developed GLBT positive tracts that aren't religious, but just have a positive message. And so we put him in there. We waited for him to come through and clean the restrooms, and we went back in after he left, and they were all still there. Because these don't look any different than the religious tracts that other people leave around. And obviously it's designed that way to try to let them pass a little bit in some of the environments. And some of the other materials we use are designed the same way. But of all the, over the last 15 years, we've done dozens and dozens and dozens of school visits. Small schools with 8 students, universities with tens of thousands. And the method is the same for each time. And we've never once been confronted. We've never been asked to leave. We've never had any drama about our visit. And that's because we don't draw any attention to ourselves when we're doing it. Because we know it's not about us. It's about the students. It's about getting information to where they can find it. And that's how we feel we're successful in doing that, because it's not about us. And even the smallest school we went to, which was at school with 8 students, Seventh-day Adventist school in Florida, and the school was about the size of this 3rd floor broken up into rooms, and there's a library and a gym and all those things. And so I went in and I asked the secretary in her office, I said, my sister is homeschooling her kids, which she is, it's true. But even if it wasn't true, this is a war and we can lie anyway, right? Yes. But I said, I want to know what curriculum your school uses, whether you use Becca books or accelerated Christian education. I just started speaking the language, which obviously disarms somebody who's thinking, oh, well, here's the curriculum we use. And she said, you know what, why don't you just take a walk around the school? Our library's here, here's our gym, just check the place out and let me come back if you have any questions. When I walked in, my pockets were full. You could actually see the squares in my pockets. And when I left, they were empty. She gave me full reign of the school to do whatever I wanted, and then I just walked out. Said thank you and walked out. Every time that we've ever been in a situation where it's small like that or tight, we always just speak the language, and it really disarms the people because they think that you're on their side. And that really makes it, it's taking that ugly past and using it in a positive way to help other people. It really makes a big difference. But for the most part, when we do this, we have absolutely no interaction with anybody at the school. And that makes it very easy for us to do our stuff and walk away. We also use the internet as a tool of helping people, not just in this country, but that's how most of the people in other countries find out about us, which is great. It's a powerful tool. About 10 years ago, I sat down at my computer to try to figure out what our students would find if they went online and looked for ex-gay information, because kids that are religious are the primary target of reparative therapy, or as they call it, restorative therapy. And so I typed in xgay.com, the most common domain name I could think of for this stuff. And it came up that nobody owned it. And I just couldn't believe that nobody, whose business it is to do reparative therapy wouldn't own xgay.com. That just seems like a no-brainer to me. And I mean, my minor at Jerry Falwell School was marketing, so they taught me everything I needed to know about target marketing. So now if you go to xgay.com, you're going to come to our website, and you're going to find our information. Slightly different than what most people are thinking, but I had to do something with that time I spent at Liberty University, so I use it against them. But really, it makes perfect sense to have information in places where people don't expect to find it. And we've helped many students that way, but we've also helped a lot of other people who just randomly type in xgay.com, and there's a bunch of other variations of it that are actually directed toward our site as well. And you know, in the past couple of weeks, when it's been in the media a lot about reparative therapy and xgay stuff, especially with Michelle Bachman's husband, you know, I don't know why people aren't looking at her, because my gaydar goes off even more for her than it does for him. You know, it's not uncommon for two ex-gay people to get together. But whenever the ex-gay conversation comes up in the mainstream, you know, we hear about this stuff because it's kind of part of the world that we live in. But most people in the world, that stuff isn't part of their regular day life. So they hear ex-gay stuff, they type in xgay.com, and they're opened up to our ideas about that topic. So that's another way that we've helped reach not just students, but really anybody. And we try to use every means possible to make sure that we can reach students so that they can come to us when they're comfortable to do it. And the process is the same for each student, no matter who they are, what religion they come from. The first question is always, am I going to go to hell, or my religion's version of hell, because I'm gay? That's always the first question. And I know that that's not a theological question. That's them saying, I hate myself so much that I don't believe I'm lovable, acceptable to anybody. And the very first steps that we take them through is getting them to identify when it was that they felt different about who they are. Remember, like I talked about feeling different when I was in like 4, 5, 6, 7? And then when it was that they felt guilty about feeling different. And everybody that we've encountered, in fact, everybody that I know, there's always it's a different point in time. It's usually, you know, I feel different, maybe strange about how I'm feeling, but then there's another moment when somebody else, usually an adult, says something that makes you feel guilty about feeling different. Somebody planted that seed in our head saying, you feel different, but you need to feel guilty about it. And that's the jumping off point. And the next point is getting them to separate that the idea of being gay has anything to do with religion at all, because it doesn't. Just like heterosexuality has nothing to do with religion. Your orientation is just who you are. But in this country and in a lot of places in the world, we've allowed a very unholy union between religion and homosexuality. The opposite of homosexuality is not religion, it's heterosexuality. That's the you know, but we've allowed religion to become the opposite, and that doesn't make any sense to me. You know, whenever you read the paper, or watch TV, or go online and you see an article about homosexuality, who is the opposing point of view? They don't have somebody who just says, well, I'm straight and I don't like it. It's somebody who always identifies by their religion, and we allow people to get away with that marriage being there. So we help students make that separation and understand that, you know, you can be gay in any religion you choose, because religion is a choice, and your orientation isn't. But getting that separation made really makes a big difference, because we've all been tricked into thinking that our orientation has something to do with religion. But it really doesn't, because I've met straight people that are Baptist, straight people that are Jewish, straight people that are atheists. Doesn't affect them. Same thing with gay people. But making those distinctions, that difference and guilty, and then also separating the idea that being gay has anything to do with religion, are the jumping off points for everybody. And really, you know, it doesn't take much to give somebody hope. Even just a little bit of hope sometimes is all somebody needs to just stay afloat and move forward in their lives. And that's what Heartstrong is all about, is providing that hope. And that's why the title of the presentation was Hope Needs Only Hands and Hearts. That's all we have to do is give and think and be. And that can really provide a lot of hope for people. So, is there a question over here? I thought I saw. It's hard for me sometimes to look to the right anymore, especially the extreme right. So I'm not ignoring you. I know you thought you were on the left, but was there? Yes.
Yeah. Does this organization have any relationship to any churches? I mean, there are a number of us who are here tonight from.
Yes. Well, we do get support from a lot of churches, pretty much any church you can think of. We've had pagan churches and gay fundamentalist churches actually help support us. And we're like Mother Teresa. We will accept donations from anyone, because it's all going for the greater good, and that's how we believe. And obviously, like tonight, we do a lot of programs and forums that are sponsored by religious and non-religious groups. It's always fun to get everybody together to let everybody know that everybody in the same town is still alive and working and doing their work. That's always a good thing. But yeah, that's exactly, we've experienced just about everything. I think, you know, some people are able to understand that concept of human kindness, which is what I said Heartstrong runs on. And some people still, they can't get it. They really think that, why would you help gay students in a religious school if you're not religious yourself? You know, some churches, unfortunately, have forgotten about human kindness. I'm guessing nobody here belongs to one of those churches, but a lot of people forget about that. Yes? Okay.
Repeat the question.
Yes. Well, the first question was what religion my grandmother was, and she was no religion, which is what my parents really... She was what us fundamentalists would have called an Easter Christmas Christian. Whenever she could buy a new outfit and hat, then she would go to church, because Christmas and Easter are generally times when people have new outfits. So I think she would just go to whatever church was closest to her. It was more like to show what she was wearing than, the theology. But so she had no religious ties at all. In fact, that was one of the things that led my father to become a fundamentalist. He never experienced any religion, and when he was 18, he was walking down the street on a Wednesday night, and a church, the First Welsh Baptist Church, their door is right on the sidewalk, and they had their doors open. They're having their Wednesday night prayer meeting, and he had never experienced anything like that. So he just walked in out of curiosity to see what was going on. And within 2 months, he was off to Lancaster Bible College to become a fundamentalist minister. He could have walked into a Shriners meeting and had the same warm reception, provided he made a donation to the Children's Hospital. But he walked into that space. It was just totally random. And I always say, wherever you are, what groups you belong to, if you're church, whatever, when a stranger darkens that door, you never know how your influence on them at that first moment will affect not just their lives, but their kids and everybody else's. So my grandmother never really understood, why that was so attractive to him, but it certainly drew him right in. And she passed away about 6 or 7 years ago. But even in her death, she was in the hospital for 2 weeks with pneumonia, and my parents and sisters, who lived 20 minutes down the road, just refused to visit her because they were afraid that somebody would see them going to visit somebody who was going to hell, and they didn't want to have to explain what they were doing. They really believe in the New Testament where it says that you need to separate yourself from people who are living in sin to show them how much you love them. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. And if you've ever dealt with fundamentalist people, their definition of the word love is very different than most regular people. And that's a perfect example of it. They actually thought they were showing my grandmother love by not associating with her, just like by not associating with me. That's why it was easy for me to understand that my parents didn't know how to love themselves. But even at the first thing that my mother sent out after my grandmother passed away, she said, there will be no flowers allowed at the funeral. Not because my mother's some eco-green person and didn't want to kill a bunch of plants, but she just knew that my grandmother loved flowers. Her prized possession was her little garden space outside her retirement apartment where she would take her old nursing shoes and use them as planters and grow flowers in them. So fortunately, most of the people that were coming to that service were not fundamentalist Christians like my parents. So it was the most garish display of flowers ever at any funeral. I don't know if you're supposed to have glitter on flowers at a funeral, but it was there. And of course, my parents were fuming. And my mother ran out of skirts before everybody even got in. But can't you just picture that? Just a big box from the Goodwill handing everybody an ugly skirt to put on. But then after the service, she stood up and she said, just so everybody knows, there'll be no graveside service. Barb, my grandmother, will be going to the cemetery alone. Once again, trying to show people how they were separating from her. And that made me realize at that point that I had done the right thing all those years ago in walking away. Because while there are some people who, with education and some personal stories, can actually move forward on this issue, there are some people who just are not going to be able to do that. And obviously, my parents and sisters are those people. But that kind of reaffirmed for me that I was doing the right thing. But even in all of that, I felt like my grandmother was teaching me at least one more thing, and that was that I had made the right decision all those years ago in refocusing and building my own family. As far as fundamentalism and growth, the fundamentalist part of every religion is the fastest growing part of every religion. So that's something to be concerned about. Well, that's why churches that are open and liberal, and not Jerry Falwell liberal, but liberal, are actually the ones that have the most empty seats. People really, for some reason, are drawn to that black and white that a lot of fundamentalism provides to them. It tells them where they came from, what they're supposed to do, and what's going to happen to them after they die. So a lot of people, they put faith in that, and then they feel what they think is a comfortableness with that idea, and that's troubling. But that's why those of us who, if you belong to a church that's not like those people, you need to be loud about what you believe in, so people know that there's a place for them to go to express what they feel and think about those things.